Hello, I'm Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity, and today we're going to be talking about China rattling its sabers with Taiwan. Let's go there. What did they do? Dozens of Chinese military planes and vessels right out in the Taiwan waters. It caused Taiwan to react. And as you can see all the way down there in Reuters, the Czech parliament chief assures Taiwan of her support. I'm sure Taiwan feels a ton better knowing that Czechoslovakia is behind them. We see here that Taiwan had to scramble. They scrambled fighter jets. They put its Navy on alert. They activated missile systems. So we're getting tight and dodgy in this whole story. And this just happened very recently here. And so what does this mean? We're talking about this kind of stuff at Peak Prosperity all the time because there are enormous economic consequences of war. Above and beyond anything, war is usually an economically devastating moment in time. The Wall Street Journal had an actual truthy opinion. It's getting harder and harder in this post-truth world to find truth. Here was some that came out January 29th from the editorial board. They noted here that honesty is not the default policy in Washington these days. So the political and media classes were jolted this weekend by the leak of a private warning by a U.S. general telling his troops to prepare for a possible war with China over Taiwan in just 2 years. Imagine a warrior telling his troops to get ready for war. Unthinkable in this day and age. They went on to note that this is General Michael Minihan. He told his troops, "I hope I'm wrong, but my gut tells me we will fight in 2025. He says in his memo he wants his force to be ready to fight and win in the first island chain off the eastern coast of continental Asia. Could he be talking about Taiwan? He called for taking more calculated risks in training. His document won't be remembered for subtlety. One of his suggestions is that airmen with weapons qualifications start doing target practice with unrepentant lethality. Another tells airmen to get their affairs in order. The candor seems to have alarmed higher-ups, of course, and it was a leak and all this and that. But listen, this is what a general should be doing, talking to his troops or her troops about getting ready for war, if that's where you think you're going. Obviously, that's your job. Unlike the CDC, which forgot what its job was. Sounds like somebody who knows what their job is. And I'm going to explain why it looks like 2025 is the right year. This is the kind of thing we talk about at Peak Prosperity all the time. If you just understand these two charts, I think you can understand why conflict is inevitable with China. Chart 1, China's oil demand. You can see it rising smartly from 2000 on the left up through 2022, 2023. That orange dotted line shows that we can just expect them to be at maybe, 16, 17 million barrels per day of oil consumption. Production being a fraction of that. So China needs its oil to come from somewhere. By 2025, it's going to be needing to import at least 10 million barrels a day. Meanwhile, the United States, for its part, in the blue on the left from the U.S. EIA is actual production. In black in the squiggly line is my own hand-drawn assessment of where oil is going to go, with that prediction falling out there somewhere around 2025. U.S. oil production noses over, never to return. That gap between that red, that orangish line on top, and imports is going to be imports down below. That's what we're going to need in the United States. Guess what? You either compete honestly. That's called rising prices, and you pay, and your people, have to put up with high inflation, or you fight over it. All wars are resource wars. I think this is what that general was referring to. We're going to have the belief in the United States that's our oil, and the Chinese are going to have the belief it's their oil. So that's the conflict. That's what's brewing. Now, NATO chief, this guy, Jens Stoltenberg, says any attempt by China to change the status quo to Taiwan Strait will cause severe consequences for regional and global security. It's good for NATO to worry about regional security, of course. He says, quote, at the bottom, there is no justification for China's threats against Taiwan, and it will be in no one's interest to have a conflict around Taiwan. That's what NATO says. Of course, very moral. Severe consequences, regional instability, no bueno, no good. Except NATO may not have a leg to stand on. This is Libya, which NATO bombed. There it is after NATO on the left, and there it is before NATO with that orange arrow pointing to the same building. A complete disaster after NATO came on board, and before, that looks relatively calm and peaceful. Again, this time on the left before NATO. Here after NATO with that distinctive building orienting you plus that hill. Before it's peaceful and clean and prosperous, and after it is a complete ruin. That's completely 100% due to NATO. So, before NATO, what did they have in Libya? Let me get my drawing tool out real quick for you. Before NATO, under Gaddafi, there was no electricity bills in Libya. Electricity was free for all citizens. This is true. Before NATO came and Gaddafi was in charge, there was no interest on loans. Banks in Libya are state-owned, and loans are given to all its citizens at 0% interest by law. Home is considered a human right in Libya. Gaddafi vowed that his parents would not get a house until everyone in Libya had a home. All newlyweds in Libya received 60,000 dinars, which was 50,000 US dollars. It's not that anymore, from the government to buy their first apartment. Education and medical treatments are free. Wow, what a tyrant. Libyans took up farming as a career. They received farmland. They received a farming house, equipment, seeds, livestock, all for free. Gaddafi's biggest crime was he took the oil profits of his nation and used them for his own citizens. That was completely 100% not acceptable to NATO. And so NATO came in and had a little something to say about that. After NATO, after Gaddafi, what do we have now? Well, it's kind of scrim. We have open air slave markets with executions, torture. All of this now is just par for the course in Libya. Armed groups, as they say here in Reuters even, execute and torture civilians in Libya with almost complete impunity. 7 years after the revolution that toppled Muammar Gaddafi, it wasn't a revolution. It was NATO support and air support that actually took out that leader. Extrajudicial and unlawful killings are rampant, they're noting here in this article. It's gotten no better. And so, even in Foreign Policy Journal, they said, well, maybe it's time for NATO to admit that it killed a bunch of civilians in Libya. Indeed, it did. Devastating toll that was not just the bombing campaign, but the after effects of that toll. So who was in charge? Well, it wasn't Jens Stoltenberg. It was this guy, Anders Rasmussen, was in charge during that 2011 attack on Libya. But of course, Jens took right over and hasn't missed a single beat. So, yeah, I'm not buying NATO's moral tone on this one. I think they have some atonement to do before they can really pick up that moral mantle and lecture people about causing regional instability, because all of Europe is suffering from Libya's regional instability. So, you want to understand more about that? Those two charts I showed you about oil are the most important charts. I explained the whole thing over here in the shocking state of the world. If you want to get 20% off of being able to access my premium products, use that code TRUTH23. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. See you next time.